So moving on then. So forward-looking statement again. I'm going to reinforce this because basically we aren't Salesforce. We are using some of their content, which will make forward-looking statements because pretty much everything in TDX is coming soon rather than you can play with it right now. Always make purchasing decisions on currently available features because you'll be hearing also some of my opinions this evening and you really don't want to be making purchasing decisions based on those, let me assure you. So yes, the tree of thanks. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you all. I don't know what our numbers are at the moment. I can probably see that on something else. 50 people, a nice round 50. Although I guess 2 of those are me, so 48 from everybody else. Well done. Okay, so the first topic I want to talk about is Devops Center. So this felt like quite a late breaking change because it only cropped up in the keynote rather than having a session all to itself. So I wonder if they were kind of still trying to get some things done prior to the keynote. So the idea, anyone who's kind of worked in an agile fashion, this concept should be quite familiar. In Devops Center, you break your work up into work items. That's what we've got here. It's kind of like a ticket. So I imagine it won't be too long before we see the return of something like Agile Accelerator to show your tickets in a Kanban view. Although it feels like the actual list view for work items ought to be able to handle some of that Kanban stuff to me, but we shall see. So when you click into a ticket, as I've shown here, this is the page that you get opened up. So on the top right, you can see Launch Dev Environment, which opens a sandbox associated with the work. So it's been sandboxes in all the demos that I've seen. And it's not clear to me if the sandbox is created at this point, if it doesn't exist, or whether you pick one and assign it to it. But in some way, shape or form, the work item is associated with a particular sandbox, because clearly that's going to be doing the tracking. So the demos I've seen, again, a lot of this unfortunately is the demos I've seen because I don't think there is even anywhere to sign up for a pilot for this and then get rejected. So I haven't been through that particular process yet. But they talk about the sandbox being populated from a Git repository. But I don't know whether that's as part of launching the environment that it takes the contents of the Git repository and pushes it, or whether it assumes that your production environment is in step with version control, so a clone brings you in step appropriately. So if you're following the Summer 20 release notes, you'll have seen that source tracking in sandboxes became available in beta. So clearly this is the secret sauce behind Devops Center, as the changes that you make to the development environment, the sandbox, are automatically tracked and shown again, as you can see on the screenshot there, without you having to pull and diff against your version control system or do anything at the command line or using something like a source tree. So you can then pick which of those changes you want to include in your work item, and then you can create basically you can create a branch and then submit this to your version control system. So again, all the demos been GitHub. There has been talk that it will support GitLab and others. I just use more of a vanilla Git repository myself outside of GitHub, so I'll be interested to see how I would hook into that if I don't actually have something with things like a pull request API, etc. The resources that I've seen say that others will be supported, so we shall see what comes out on that. So basically, when you say that you want to include all those changes in your work item, you then press a button, and behind the scenes, it creates a branch, and in GitHub, it creates a pull request. And at that point in time, the wheels slightly come off of most of the demos because basically they flip over to the command line and say that you need to get a developer to verify the pull request, merge the changes into your whatever you call your branch, develop or main or release, and then deploy those to production. So I'm guessing that is future functionality they're currently building at the moment to try and make that more of a GUI process from end to end. As you would expect, I've also not seen anything about, if you want to merge in changes that other people have made in other work items because you need to build on top of those, whether you can actually interact with that development environment and Git while it's in flow, if it tracks that, etc. Whether you can do that from a GUI side of things. So again, it feels like we're quite early on this journey. So the opinion bit coming up now. So this looks to me to be very much squarely aimed at admins because the shift to Salesforce DX turned the version control system into the source of the truth. But obviously, if you've then still got admins promoting change via change sets, that clearly presents a problem because it's going to be out of step. I mean, the way I handle that at the moment is that the admins and the functionals make changes in my Scratch org, and I then pull the changes and handle all the Git merging, etc. So this does look quite interesting if there's a way of kind of giving non-developers, I wouldn't say non-technical, but non-developers a way of interacting with version control. That'll be obviously very cool. But as I say, I think the how you'd interact with a branch in flight if you want to merge in other changes or rebase or anything like that, I suspect that'll get a bit more sticky at the GUI level. So there may well be continuing cases where you have to break out to the CLI. I also think it will be quite a while before this becomes GA, because it looks like there's still quite a bit to do even to get the basic process admin friendly. So I wouldn't expect to be seeing this anytime soon. So you can find out more about this at the admin blog. I recognise that is just a hyperlink rather than a short link, so that's not very helpful, but we'll share the deck after this so you can click on that. If you want to see the details, so basically, oops, sorry, jump back. On every slide at the bottom, there's the link to where you can find the sessions, so go into the developer channel, and also the little insert here will tell you what the name of that particular session was, so you can find that in the playlist. In this case it was the keynote. It was just a snippet in there, so it was a blink and you miss it type of thing, but that'll be consistent on every slide if you need to find out more information. Next few slides will be lighter touches on some of the new platform features, so I'm not going to go into the same level of detail that I did then, to everyone's eternal gratitude, I'm sure. So Salesforce Functions. Who remembers Salesforce Functions, formerly known as Evergreen? So this shouldn't come as a surprise that this is still being talked about. It was announced at Dreamforce last year, and it was launched in private developer preview, and it's now made its way to private pilot. Personally, I don't know what the difference is, but one thing I do know is I have not been allowed into either, so I'm afraid I can't tell you an awful lot more other than what we see out on the public side of things. If you haven't come across Functions or Evergreen before, this is a technology to allow you to write code that runs on Heroku in whatever supported language you choose. And you can easily call those functions from Salesforce and get seamless access to your Salesforce data. So you don't have to worry about authentication and authorization. Your code runs inside a walled garden tied to your Salesforce org, so Salesforce handles all the authentication side of things. So basically, rather than breaching limits and spending a lot of time fighting if you need more CPU or heap, this is basically a way that you can migrate some of your functionality out to another platform, which can then automatically scale with elastic scale, so you don't have to spend all your time tuning and fighting, etc. What it does mean though is it will obviously be asynchronous, because you're going out to another platform, and so it's going to change probably the way that you have to do things like error handling, and it may change the way your business logic is actually carried out. But if you have processing the platform is struggling to handle, you'll be able to move it out to Functions and take advantage of Heroku's ability to web scale. And if you want to know more about serverless in general, whoever that is, mute themselves, thank you. So yeah, you can find out more about serverless in general, Functions in particular, by watching the YouTube video linked there of our Doug session, which felt like it was about a decade ago, but it was actually earlier this year. It was around February, March time, and we're all in there like lunatics, stood within 6 feet of each other and talking to each other and hugging and all sorts. Madness. You can also see the latest demo, again logging into the TDX site, finding the built, integrated and scalable apps using Salesforce Functions. And while the hyperlinks there says, want to sign up, apply here, so it suggests that you can apply to work with Functions. All you're actually doing is hitting a page saying, I would like some more information. So don't think that by clicking that, you're going to be into the Functions pilot and everything's going to be hunky-dory. You would need to contact your account executive, because it's one of those type of things that you need to have. And you need to have an account executive who knows what pilots are, which I think eludes a lot of us at the lower end of the scale as well. So some exciting times for Apex. The safe navigation operator is announced. So for those who aren't from a development background, this probably sounds a bit like a made-up term like bulkification, but it's actually a really common operator supported by many other languages. So what it allows you to do is to chain a bunch of dereferences without having to worry about if any of them are null. So my example here, I want to get the account's parent's name, and I've got a contact. But the contact could be null, the account could be null, the link to the parent could be null. So without a safe navigation operator, I've got a bunch of checks to make sure no bits are null, work my way through it, and then I can go and get the result. With the safe navigation operator, I put a question mark before each of the dots. And basically what that says is if the left-hand side of the question mark is null, then null is returned. Otherwise, it proceeds to the other side of the dot and dereferences the value. So in this case, if any of contact account or parent is null, the result will be set to null. But I don't have to really care about that apart from putting in these question marks. And if you're working with like deeply nested JSON is the one that I always come up against, where I've got 8 or 9 that I really want to put into dot notation, but I have to check each and every one of them. I think this will end up saving you quite a bit of code. And again, link on the bottom right-hand side. So I just realized that in Chris Peterson's demo, he actually shows function calls being chained through this mechanism. I'm assuming that objects and fields would work in the same way because it's basically in terms of dots and dereferences. But yeah, keep an eye on that to make sure that actually is the case rather than necessarily following my advice here. Another Apex feature in pilot in summer 20, Apex transaction finalizers. So these allow you to take action when a queuable completes. So you can determine the outcome of the queuable, and if it failed, you can get access to the exception, interrogate the exception, and decide whether it's something that you did and you can recover from, or whether it's something that went wrong on the platform, whether it's worth requeuing. So the upshot is, once it goes GA, we don't have to keep polling to find out whether our queuable jobs succeeded or failed. We can basically, essentially, we can have something like a callback that fires when it completes and lets us know how it got on. So I think that'll be pretty cool as well. So next up, Einstein Vision and Language. So not something I've done a huge amount with. I did a not hot dog thing several years ago just to see if I could, but I haven't really come across too much in the way of use cases for this in the wild. So the TDX session for this is basically divided into what's available now and what will be available. Well, actually, it's what is also available now, but it was the future when TDX took place because that was prior to the summer 20 release. So available now is text sentiment. So that's a pre-built model. You don't have to train it yourself. And that identifies the sentiment of a piece of text. So if it's a statement made by a customer, it allows you to determine whether they're saying nice or nasty things about you. Excuse me. Text intent allows you to use your own data to train your own model. So you can identify meaning and objective embedded in a piece of text. So the kind of thing that you could use to determine the correct routing for a case based on the description. Generally available Einstein Vision allows you to classify images using pre-built models or by creating your own. So you can use that to do things like locate your branding or a competitor's branding in a customer's photo. So new in summer 20. The most interesting one I think is optical character recognition. That's generally available. Oh, we've got pilot there. That probably needs to come out before I share the deck. But certainly optical character recognition, I looked last night, is GA in the release notes. So basically this detects alphanumeric text in an image based on pre-trained models. So again, you don't have to train them. They're available from a single REST API endpoint. There's a bunch of models trained for specific use cases. So things like business card scanning, product lookup, digitizing documents. I played around with business card scanning a few years ago, and I must admit it was incredibly difficult because of the huge variations in styles and colors and fonts and things like that. And almost everybody that was doing it ended up doing it manually. So just taking photos and sending those over to an office full of people who would manually type them in. So I'm quite interested to try this out and see how it copes with sort of glossy business cards with weird fonts on them. And also in summer 20, Einstein Intent supports multiple languages. No surprise that they're mostly European, and Chinese and Japanese are in beta. It also supports out-of-domain text. So this is quite useful. So basically, if you had a model with a bunch of labels and you gave it some text that didn't fall into any of the labels, it would return you a reasonably good probability that it matched to one of the labels that was nothing like it. So it didn't seem an awful lot removed from guesswork. So out of domain text, basically you can create a model that can handle these type of predictions and it will return an empty set of probabilities because it doesn't recognize it rather than trying to give you something which isn't very useful. So next thing was API enhancements, doing more with less API calls. So the composite endpoint for the REST API, that is already around, has been around for a little while. That allows you to make up to 25 sub-requests in a request, and that will only consume a single call from the limits. And you can use the output of one of those requests as an input to the others. So you could, for example, insert an account and then use the account ID to insert when inserting an opportunity later on. And the results and bodies of all the requests are included in a single response body. Composite Graph extends this and allows you to use the output of multiple requests in later requests. So you could insert an account, get the idea of that, insert a contact as a child of the account, get the idea of that, insert an activity for the contact. So you can go a lot deeper. You can also do different request types. So again, the demo that was given had some inserts, then it had a describe, and then it had some SOQL queries. So basically, the Composite Graph is expected to be generally available in winter 21, which sounds like a long time away, but is actually the next release of Salesforce. Although given how we are at the moment, that 3 months, again, 3 or 4 months could again seem like a very long time, I guess. So on the limit side of the API calls, there's a new usage-based entitlement, which allows paid active orgs, key thing there, paid active orgs, to exceed their daily allowance by a certain amount, which obviously clarifies things nicely. But you get some leeway if the pod can support it, if the instances can support it, without having your integration cut off. So it allows you to go over if you need to during a spike. And your entitlement is based on usage over 30 days rather than the 24-hour limit, for example. So as long as you're not going over all the time, you should be good on that. But it does all sound, I must admit, a little bit vague. And if these are kind of mission critical integrations, you probably want to make sure you've got enough API calls licensed rather than hoping that you can get away with a few over the top. There's also an updated SOQL limit. But sadly, before you get too excited, it's not the number of statements or the records retrieved in a single transaction. It's the max query size. So this has been increased from 20,000 characters to 100,000 characters. And you can include up to 55 parent-child relationships. Next, in a slight departure, we're going to have a poll before we talk about the details. But the polls may give it away, I guess. So I'm just going to fire up the first poll. Who remembers SOQL select star from whatever, or SQL rather select star from whatever, and misses it, I guess? So lots of people, 62, 65% of people are voting. Looks like most people remember it. Okay, going to end that poll. So the next poll. Who, because they missed SQL select star, rolled their own using schema describe and building up a huge list of fields that got queried regardless of what you really wanted, because it allows you to use a single method, and it included large text areas and blew your heap size if you had a lot of records and all that kind of thing. And you felt a bit bad about it, but you really needed that functionality, and it saved you a huge amount of time going forward. Oh, wow, we got some. Oh, looks like everyone was good. Looks like we've got a lot of people who well, very good, very impressive. Only 35% at the moment. Wow, what a bunch of goody two shoes we have here. Okay, gonna end that poll. Yeah, so very good. Okay, so we did those polls. So in Pilot is the new SOQL fields function. So basically, this is closed Pilot, by the way, rather than open Pilot. So again, you need to talk to your account executive. They are currently sourcing participants, so this might be one you can get into if your account exec has heard of it. But fields allows you to achieve groups of fields via a single function call, effectively. So all is used here. That means all fields in the object. There is also custom, which retrieves all custom fields but excludes standard fields, so you can see what you've added to a standard object, for example. And this is something Todd and I were talking about before the session started. It would be really cool if you could do things like specify a field set and have it just retrieve all the fields that are in that field set without you having to iterate the field set and have all that repeated code left, right, and center. So yeah, if you're interested in that, as I say, they are currently sourcing participants, so contact your AE and see how your luck goes. So the thing that I was most excited about, I would say, from TDX, well, actually I was excited about it when I saw something about it beforehand, is Code Builder. So I tried really hard and I twisted arms and I pulled strings and I talked to everybody I knew who could get me on that, including the product managers and all sorts, and I failed miserably. They said, go and talk to your AE, but every time I talk to my AE, they say, Pilot? How does that work then? What is that? which I think is quite common if you're not at the enterprise level of licenses. So that's slightly unfortunate. But so basically, what it is a web-based IDE for Salesforce that runs in the browser. So they're kind of touting it a bit as a replacement for Developer Console, but it's actually not. It's a lot more powerful than that. But also, it's probably missing some of the things that are really easy to do in Developer Console, which I'm not sure. I get the impression they may still be doing some of that in more of a console environment, but not 100% sure. So effectively, in the browser, it's pretty much a full-fledged Visual Studio Code. So as I say, I couldn't get in the pilot by Visual Studio Code Spaces. And I've got that set up, so I can demo that. I can show you the technology behind it, and hopefully point out a couple of things which I'm sure Salesforce are going to make easier. So if you're going to use Code Spaces, it's a Microsoft thing, and you need an Azure account, because basically each code space is a virtual machine. So Azure offers 12 months free with a certain usage limitations, so I've signed up for that plan. I haven't got anywhere near any of the usage thus far, but I haven't really done an awful lot with it either, if I'm honest. Just been playing around with it. So these are disposable. They're a bit like Scratch orgs. You spin them up as you need them, delete them when you're done. They're also managed, so you don't have to worry about setting up your own VM, building Kubernetes containers and configure those and all that kind of thing. That side of it has actually worked really well. Literally, you just do a couple of bits, install a couple of things, click a couple of buttons, and it all mostly goes well. So you need a couple of VS Code extensions. You need a Azure account, and there's also Visual Studio Code Spaces, and that's what integrates with the cloud machine, that integrates your development environment. Okay, so I am now going to try and demo this. So I'm going to have to switch between a couple of machines. So I'm going to try and share from somewhere else if I can find my Zoom window. Okay, that looks good. Share screen. I need to find the right one. Where are we? That looks like the right one. And that is sharing something, isn't it? I just need to find that window now. Bear with me one moment. You can all see it fine. I can't find it. Okay, good. I've got it. Okay, so this is regular VS Code. Just checking that you can see the whole thing because I've got my toolbar. Can you see down the bottom? Can someone tell me? Yeah. Okay, you can. So because I've got the Code Spaces extension installed and I've connected to my Azure, you'll see down the bottom left I've got this little green bit, this little green icon. And that basically allows me to connect to an existing code space, or I can create a new code space, but I won't because that takes forever. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm moving off of my local machine and I'm moving onto the remote machine, the code base that's hosted in the cloud. And then my development environment is going to connect to that and I'm going to continue working on that remotely. So my local session is effectively gone at this point in time. I was going to demo the whole thing of creating a code space and installing stuff, but it was about 7 or 8 minutes of watching node modules install and things like that. So it wasn't the most exciting. So looks like it's getting there, starting the remote server. So this is basically the same code from my version control system, but it is running on a remote machine, which is pretty cool. And as you can see, I've even got a terminal in there. So that's pretty nice. It's a Linux system. Get rid of that. So I can type Linux commands and do things. And I can also run SFDX. And SFDX doesn't come with code spaces because code spaces is a Microsoft thing, but I was able to install it using NPM. So effectively, what I think you're going to get, and this dovetails with what Nathan Totten's been saying, what you get, your environment effectively is a virtual machine. So you can install whatever extensions you want. You can install things on the local machine. On this, I've got sudo rights, so I'm guessing that would be the same thing from the Salesforce side of things when that's there. But anyway, so that's basically connected to the remote session, and it's all available as expected. So what I'm now going to do is cut over here to my other machine and try and find the right window to share. Okay, so what you're looking at now is my Codespaces account, my environment. So you can see I've got a couple of them there. I've got one that's suspended. They suspend after 30 minutes if I don't do anything with them. And I've got another one which is showing that it's available. So if I click this, what this is doing now is there's my visual code environment. And it's opening the remote and connecting to it much like the other one did. So we'll give it a moment or two for that to happen. As you can see, the same information is in there. However, the difference is this time, if you look, I'm running in the browser. So this is pretty much the identical Visual Studio environment. I've got a bunch of extensions in there. I've got my terminal. I can do SFDX commands. And then if I go over to my other machine, if I can find that again. That's my Codespaces. I'm going to make a directory called Keir on my laptop. In fact, it's not Keir, it's Key, because I can't spell properly. And if I ls over here, you can see my new directory has now appeared. So effectively from the browser, and I can do pushes to orgs, I can do anything that I can do in the CLI. The integration of extensions with the CLI is all there. And that's all running in the browser. So this is running on a Mac that I don't think even has Node installed. I just use it for office work and that kind of thing. So this is, I think this is very cool. So the difficult bits with this were having to install the CLI via NPM. I mean, it's not overly difficult if you're used to that, but if you're not, it's a hoop to jump through. Authentication of orgs is a bit painful because to authenticate with my Dev Hub, for example, I had to use the JWT grant because I couldn't figure out a way of opening Windows from the terminal. I guess there might be a way of extending the X Windows server through to my local machine, but it's been a number of years since I've done anything like that, and I didn't really have the stomach for it in the time I had available. So I suspect this is the kind of thing that Salesforce will make a lot more straightforward for Code Builder. Once you've authenticated against your Dev Hub, you can create scratch orgs, and then if you run the SFDX force org open, obviously it won't open because you can't open the windows, but it will give you a link that you can then copy and use on the machine that you're actually on in order to get access to that scratch org. So that's not too bad, albeit it's a little bit clunky. But I can see that being the kind of thing where Salesforce can streamline that quite nicely because they're not having to build out all of this underlying technology and wiring that Microsoft have already built from them. I'm also going to be interested to see the pricing of this because basically each environment requiring a virtual machine means it could scale quite quickly given how many developers are out there and how many things that we do. So hopefully like scratch orgs, there will be an entitlement included in your license and hopefully some small entitlement for developer editions. And you only have to pay if you need more. But I don't know anything about that for sure. So again, it'll be interesting to see where that comes up. Okay, so I'm gonna now stop sharing that, go back to my PowerPoint, and I'm going to find my PowerPoint if I can. Try that again.
Keir, I'm so much happy you didn't get access either.
Honestly, I was talking to various product owners, product managers. I pulled every string I possibly could, and every time they just came back and said, "Yeah, sorry, your AE needs to nominate you. There's no way that we can do that for you." I did get a very kind offer from someone if I could let you have access to my system for a while, which I thought was above and beyond, so I didn't actually take them up on that.
Wow.
Okay, so have I shared my screen correctly here? Everyone see my screen? I've lost track.
You're not on, yeah, thingy. You haven't presented it.
I think so I have, interestingly. Let me try again.
That's better.
I think I'm doing it again. Good, that time it got there. Third time's the charm. Right, so this is the last topic, the true to the core session. So we captured some of the interesting questions and answers, which I'm going to rattle through. Bear in mind, we may have misheard, misunderstood, mistranscribed. Don't take any of this as gospel. Confirm with Salesforce, confirm with your AE. And I'm guessing some of these would have been answered by product managers who may not have intended to say everything they did say anyway. I've just realised that's jumped forward a couple of slides. Let me go back to true to the core. Right. So one of the first questions was, is Aura being retired? And the answer to that is no, nor is Visualforce. Customers are running their business on these technologies. They will keep maintaining them, and they've made them easy to integrate into Lightning Web Components. Is Classic going to be retired was the next question. Everyone seems to be worried about things being retired. So they basically said Classic won't be retired until all customers have moved off, or there's a small number who can be helped off, but they won't be pushed. I don't know if anyone was watching the True to the Core session earlier on today, but what they said there was, one thing to think about if you're sticking with Classic is there is no further investment in Classic. It's just bug fix type stuff they're doing. So someone was asking, I'm intending to use Classic for the next 5 or 10 years. Is that an issue? And it's like, well, the only issue really is you'll have no improvements for 5 or 10 years. So do you really want to be in that place, or do you want to bite the bullet, take a bit of pain and get yourself onto a Lightning experience? So that was quite interesting. Now that flow triggers are GA, I can't remember what the question for this was, but basically now flow triggers are GA. There's no plan for any more investment in Process Builder or Workflow. That will just be maintenance. Flow is the future. The other stuff will still run, but it just won't be getting any love going forward. And they recognise that Lexi, all the True to the Cores that I've seen for the last 6 months have been around how slow Lightning experience is, or how slow the setup is. So they agree that it isn't fast enough, especially around setup. They're trying all avenues to improve this. So not just the code, they're also looking at the hardware, the infrastructure, to see if any of that can help.
Yeah, have you heard if there's any plans to convert process builders to flow triggers, because they're both flow metadata?
Yeah, I guess they are. I haven't seen anything about that, but I wouldn't say I'm particularly up on the flow versus process builder, etc. side of things. I have some, I do use it from time to time, but I don't follow it very closely. It's not where my interest is, I should say.
Okay. So I wouldn't actually think they'd be doing that anytime soon, because Flow is actually not on par with Process Builder just yet, namely because you can't detect whether a field has changed and what the prior value of that field was in flows. I'd imagine that'll come at some point in one of the future updates, but it's not there yet.
Cool. Thanks, Amnon.
Coolio. So one question that was asked was, people worried about Einstein Analytics not getting any love now that Tableau's come along, but Brett said we are doubling and tripling our investment in Einstein Analytics. They've never had so many people because of the Tableau acquisition. So apparently nothing to worry about there. So Dan Appleman asked about a question about the shared limit. So for example, the CPU limit is shared between a customer and the ISV's automation. So when it runs out, there's obviously lots of finger pointing saying it's your code, no, it's your code, etc., etc. So he was asking, is there a plan to separate this, much like the statements used to be separated back in the day? So the answer was, there are no plans, but the limits consumed by flows will be logged in future, rather than at the moment it pretends that flow doesn't consume anything at all, and then your next line of Apex suddenly shows it consuming 15,000 milliseconds. So they're going to improve the logging and make it easier to identify where the limit is actually being consumed to make it clearer going forward. And as I alluded to just now, True to the Core is happening more often. It's now happening monthly. And it's on Trailhead Live, and the first session finished today at 17:45. So it's a 45-minute session. It's actually pretty good. It is a little bit samey because everyone's just complaining about lightning speed and setup speed, but hopefully we'll get some different things going forward on that. Okay, so if you want more information on any of these things, as well as the excellent link that Richard sent, probably go there. In fact, don't go here. But this is the TrailheaDX link, so you need to register, then view the recordings in the developer channel. There's also other channels. There's the architect channel, admin channel, community channel. We haven't really touched on any of those, so there's lots of other information there too. There's also the, oh, blimey, that went. There's also the dedicated demos tab, so where they've done demos of things in talks, they've kind of broken those out so you can just watch the demo without any of the flim flam around it, if that's what you're particularly interested in. Yeah, take the Trailblazing quest, they put that in. Todd already talked about that. And thank you very much. That's the end of our scheduled programming.